Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Co-Teaching, What Should This Look Like? Presented by Dr. Jessica Fuda-Daddio, Kaiser University. We're so happy to have her here today, and it's my pleasure to introduce her now.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to be here and to talk about co-teaching. The idea of this presentation is kind of an overview of what co-teaching should look like. I think there's sometimes some confusion as to what models or what co-teaching really means. So today we're going to talk about that, some of the benefits of it, some of the challenges of it, and then you're actually going to see what it looks like in the classroom. So throughout this entire presentation, there are little video clips, so that way I'm not talking at you the whole time. A little bit about me. I do work at Kaiser University as a professor in the doctoral program for education. My background, though, it has a lot to do with being in the schools and in the classrooms and consulting with teachers. I currently do that as well. So I'm always in the classrooms, always seeing what's going on and hearing from the teachers of what they think would help them and benefit them. I've seen some amazing co-teaching, and I've also seen some questionable co-teaching. So that's kind of the power of what's going on today. We are going to, like I said, talk a little bit about what this should look like and the benefits and so forth. But before we actually get into that, I do want to kind of set the stage. I think most importantly is for us to remember why we do what we do. And so I'm going to bring us into a TED Talk. And as we watch this, I want us to think about the power behind the message that this teacher talks about. And this is going to set us up for the rest of the presentation.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best, and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh, God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
All right, so the TED Talk, the purpose, we're talking about co-teaching. Why in the world would you show us that? Well, I'm showing you that video, first of all, to remember the power behind being a teacher, and the fact that if you are at this webinar, most likely it's because you want to learn something new. You have a reason to be here, to make a difference. And one of the major things we need to do as educators is build relationships, just like you heard in that TED Talk. And why are relationships important? Relationships with our students, those connections that we make actually will impact them in ways beyond school, but also impact their way of learning. And why would co-teaching connect to that? Well, co-teaching is a way for us, so you heard the presenter explain in the TED Talk that you didn't like every student, and you might not, or maybe I don't want to say it that way, but instead say, sometimes students will be very tricky for us, and we can't make a connection. We just can't seem to get there. And in co-teaching, we have the opportunity of maybe the co-teacher, the person we're teaching with, can make that connection. And we can begin to build together that community that we look for whenever we're teaching. So the building of relationships is obviously, it fosters that positive relationship with the students. It creates that environment for learning and developmental abilities, but also it allows our students to be risk takers and know that they're in a safe place to do that. They're also important. I think it's important to remember that not only K through 6 is this building of relationships important, but it is almost, I don't want to say more important, but just as important as the students get into high school, get into middle school, whenever they start to feel like their opinions need to be heard, and they need to know that in some way what they're thinking is being respected. At the point of high school, they're always thinking, you know what, I've struggled, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this. I can't make connections with people. So the building relationships is honestly one of the most important things we can do as a teacher. And then from there, we build the rest. And I'll tell you, like I was telling you before, I'm in schools all of the time. And one of the main things that I am seeing as we have these standardized tests and we have all of these standards and all of these evaluations and assessments that we have to succeed at, that our students have to succeed at, we end up kind of forgetting the whole child. And we focus so much on the academics. And that's fine, but you have to also remember the whole child and the building of the character of that child and respecting that child and showing them that, you know, that they're worth it, right? That's our job. So it's beyond academics. So with co-teaching, it allows us that opportunity, because just in case, you know what I mean, if we have a group of students where we may not be able to make those connections, we have each other as co-teachers to be able to figure out how to get there. So it's pretty powerful, right? So that's why I showed you the beginning TED Talk. With that being said, so what is co-teaching? So what is co-teaching? Co-teaching, it's sometimes called team teaching. However, as we get into the models of co-teaching, you'll see that team teaching is actually part of a co-teaching model. But it is whenever two educators come together, they plan, they organize, and they instruct together. They also look over assessments, analyzing those assessments, finding a common understanding, and then sharing that with some of the classrooms, or sharing that with your classroom. So it's really a collaborative effort. That's what co-teaching truly is. The benefits of co-teaching, which kind of seem obvious probably. The one is the main one I just shared with you, which is that building of relationships, finding that we can make connections with the students, and it's obviously going to happen even more so when there's two different teachers in the class. But there's the more opportunity for one-on-one interaction between the students and the teachers, and it does, again, build to that stronger relationship where we have a little more time to offer to each student. Stronger, more creative lessons happens during co-teaching, because you have the opportunity now to collaborate and make the best decisions for the students given the assessment. There's a shared responsibility for instruction and management. Therefore, you're not doing everything on your own. I think whenever a lot of times teachers get kind of burnt out, kind of tired, and it's because of how much we take on. When you can share that responsibility with one another, not only will you create powerful lessons, but you also will have more time to create those powerful lessons. There's an increased opportunity to differentiate for students with needs. And that one's kind of huge, because we want our students to be part of the process. We want them in that classroom. We want them with their peers. And by having that opportunity to co-teach with one another, especially if we're talking about a regular ed teacher and a special education teacher, we offer those possibilities that maybe otherwise wouldn't be available to them. And then we kind of take away from we don't do the pullouts as much, the pullout type of model, because we're able to do it all right there in the classroom with their peers. That, of course, is going to create more social interactions, social integration, more friendships can be created, and that type of thing. And the last one there, teachers are able to support one another by understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? So if I have a strength in something and the co-teacher has a strength in something else, we start to feed off of that. As a teacher, sometimes we can feel a little bit alone in the process. Co-teaching can create that environment of knowing that you're not alone, that there is a team and you guys are working together for the betterment of your students. And of course, like I already said, you get to divide the workload in the classroom, which actually can be quite empowering. With every benefit of co-teaching, obviously, there's always going to be challenges to it. I'm not going to say it's negatives. These are challenges. And these challenges are what you need to overcome in order to really implement co-teaching appropriately and successfully. So the lack of administrative support, that is huge. You need the administrators to be on the same page with you. What is co-teaching? What should it look like? Why is it powerful? And we also would take us into the second one, which is that co-planning time. So the only way for us to successfully do co-teaching is to be able to co-plan, right? So having common planning time. I watched a school district, a high school actually, that redid their schedules so that way teachers could start to co-teach, and they had a shared planning time. The administrators were on board. They were ready for this type of initiative to take place. And there was such great success with the student learning, as well as students being a little happier sitting in the classroom and learning from a teacher that they really did appreciate and enjoy, even if maybe at one point they had problems with the other teachers. So it's just an interesting building of possibilities. So administration, we need them. Co-planning time, you need that too. Issues of shared control. This is huge because a lot of times when we have our own classroom, we want control of that classroom, right? Even if it's classroom management, we have it under control. We don't want somebody else coming in and trying to change that. You have to be able to give up a little bit of that control in order for co-teaching to work successfully. The other, this is probably pretty major actually. In co-teaching, you have to be able to come to a common understanding when it comes to your philosophy of teaching, your philosophy of classroom management. If you are somebody who believes that you shouldn't take away things from students when they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and then the co-teacher that you have in your classroom believes that you should be taking everything away from them, that's going to create a major issue. So you need to really kind of come to a common understanding of what your philosophy is and how we will find a common ground if our philosophies are slightly different. So in order to co-teach, I kind of already talked about some of this stuff, but you're going to need, obviously, respect. You're going to have to be able to collaborate with one another and truly be able to put your ego to the side. So that way you can really develop something that's powerful for the students. And communication is huge with each other, with the students, and with administration. And understanding of each teacher's instructional knowledge. I come from, I don't know, I didn't share this earlier, but my background is in literacy. I have a very, very strong philosophy when it comes to balanced literacy specifically. And that's where my like the guided reading, all of those things are the things I'm really good at. Because I believe in balance, though, it's not that I couldn't work with somebody who fully believed in a phonics approach, a systematic phonics approach. That's how you teach reading. That's what they think. But what we can do is come together and say, okay, you go ahead and you do the phonics piece of this, and I'm going to take what you do in phonics and I'm going to put that into the content. See, there's ways to make things work with the power of each of your instructional pieces. Shared goals and responsibilities, we already talked about that, but you need to find the time to do that in the common planning. Strong communication, again, on management and instruction. I can't stress that enough. If the philosophy is different and if you're not communicating, co-teaching could end badly. At least friendships could possibly. The willingness to share authority, again, and role shifts. Role shifts is kind of a fun and interesting thing to talk about because you're switching. You might be the main teacher in that classroom, technically, but you have to be able to shift yourself out of that and hand that control over to the next person, to the person you're co-teaching with. But also, like I said, as we go through these next few models of what co-teaching would look like, you'll see exactly what I mean by role shifting and just kind of understanding the different ways that we can actually approach co-teaching. To begin with, I want to start with just kind of an overview video, and this is on co-teaching. It's a model for special education. I want to tell you that the video is, you know, it's kind of a real deal type of video. It's not one that's been, you know, changed around or whatever. So I want you just to kind of get a feel for what these co-teachers are thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and share this, and hopefully it doesn't kick me off again. So let's try.
On first glance, this may look like a traditional classroom with one teacher in charge, but on closer inspection, it appears that there are two teachers leading instruction. Well, that's because there are. This is Herndon Middle School in the
Lisa and Jennifer, is when you walk into their classroom, there's no clear delineation between this is the general ed teacher in the classroom, this is the special ed teacher in the classroom. There are two teachers in that classroom, and they both have shared responsibility for every student. We really are making strides at Herndon to moving away from that mine and theirs perception of students and who belongs to who. If they're a Herndon Middle School student, they belong to every teacher in this building, and Lisa and Jennifer exemplify that.
Herndon has more than 20 co-teaching teams, which usually pair a content area general educator with a special education teacher. These teams allow teachers to share expertise and actively engage, challenge, and motivate students.
Most of my teaching career has been in a traditional model where I was the teacher for the entire classroom. And what I love about team teaching is through all phases, we're talking about individual students and what their needs are. And I love working with a special education teacher who has the background for ways to help students that are struggling. So we plan there, and then in the classroom with flexible grouping, with students that need different things at the same time, we're able to do that together in the classroom. So I feel much more effective through the entire process.
And I'm a first-year teacher, and it's made the transition really easy. And I love how I get the English expertise from Miss Merrick, and then I can kind of bring my special ed learning strategies expertise to that as well. So it's very helpful. Because I also co-teach with another teacher and I share a room with another teacher, I also get information from them or lesson plan ideas from them, and I can bring them to her and vice versa. So we're kind of like cross-pollinating, which is really great.
As part of FCPS's commitment to closing the achievement gap, Herndon is one of 30 schools designated as priority schools by the school system. Herndon Middle gets additional support in order to meet student achievement benchmarks. The staff at Herndon believes that co-teaching is an integral part of student success.
I absolutely think this will help close the achievement gap because we are able to focus more on individual student needs, and with more eyes and more ideas looking at what students need and then being able to work with them, it helps tremendously. And I think the students really like it as well because they have two different approaches. They see us cooperating, and I think that lends to a feeling that we're all in this together. We're all trying to help everyone achieve the most that they can.
I definitely think using co-teaching helps close the achievement gap because we have two minds thinking of lessons, two minds thinking about how we can teach the students in the most effective manner. It decreases wait time, transition time, and really allows us as teachers to get to the students and see if there's any misconceptions at all before they start practicing.
Do you guys see how we brought up a question? Wondering what does concussion mean, or who's talking, what's going to happen?
I think that co-teaching, effective co-teaching, can be the tool that closes the achievement gap that has in the past existed between students because of racial lines or socioeconomic status or disability labels. And the reason I think that is because when you have two teachers who are working together to truly build and deliver dynamic instruction, that you can meet those individual needs of every student in the classroom. And I also think that by mixing students, by not creating 21st century segregation by here are our achieving kids, here are our non-achieving kids, and separating them, that those students can then learn together and build on each other's strengths.
That's a good question. Okay, so the big idea of that video, obviously, is to kind of go over those things I already talked about. This idea of noticing the expertise and the rapport and the respect that these two co-teachers had for one another, one with the English background, one with special education, and they merged those together in order to give the best that they could to the students in the classroom, meeting the needs. Also notice how they discussed about the achievement gap, trying to lessen that, the building of relationships. The other thing, and we will get into this coming up here, but the different ways of co-teaching and this idea of modeling. I think you saw a little piece of that, so we'll kind of talk about that as we go through the next piece of our presentation. The popular co-teaching models that I do want you to be aware of as you leave today, one teach and one observe. It's one model. One teach and one support. Station teaching, team teaching, alternative teaching, and parallel teaching. So there's 6 main co-teaching models that we're going to go over today. The first one, and this is going to be interesting because I actually have video clips for each of these, so I'm just going to see how this works, and we'll see if we can get that easy transition, hopefully this time. But one of the advantages in co-teaching with the idea of the one teach and the one observe would be that the observer, the co-teacher that is observing, can actually watch the teacher teach and maybe even give some ideas of different ways to approach the lesson, almost like a coaching type of thing. But more importantly, can actually observe what the students are doing. You know, are they on track? Are they not? It's a really great way to grab data and kind of get an idea of what students are doing and be able to go from that. So letting that data drive your instruction. So there's a lot of greatness that can come out of this. So afterwards, whenever you are collaborating together to figure out what the students need. And like I said, assessment and that type of thing will drive the instruction. The next one is one teach, one assist. This one is probably the most popular one I see in schools. And many times at the high school level, so when I was consulting with the teachers there, I would see the main teacher would be in front of the classroom and the special education teacher would be assisting. So they would be walking around almost like a teaching assistant. Although there is power behind this, as you see, that you can actually assist the students, you know, that maybe need some extra support, or maybe even students that need to be pushed a little bit harder. The problem with this model, this one specifically, is that we kind of lose the collaboration piece because that doesn't seem to happen. I'm not saying there's not power in this one, but this is what you would see most of the time. And we don't want either teacher to technically be an assistant. Both are teachers, both need that equal responsibility and that, you know, and the collaboration to be able to benefit the students. So I don't think I need to show you this one either, because this one here, I think you probably are most aware of, is this one teach and one assist. One kind of jumps around and assists the other students. Parallel teaching, this one can be amazing, and you see this sometimes, but you don't see it very often in the classrooms. The parallel teaching is whenever you would actually divide the class into 2 separate groups. Okay, so if you had a class of 30, you could divide it by 15, and then both of the co-teachers are teaching the exact same thing to a smaller group of students. And in this case, what we do and what we offer the students is a less intimidating class, because the class size is smaller, even though you're in the same classroom. So, and you're learning the exact same things. And if teachers are careful about which ones go where, and you don't want to, like, okay, so if you're in special education, you're going to come over to me. If you're, you're not, you're going to go to that teacher. That's not what we want. We want a nice mix of students that are going into each of those parallel groups. So the idea of this one is to actually take a rather large class and make it smaller and give them the same type of instruction. I'm not going to show the video just because I'm scared I'll get kicked off, but this is available to you, like they said, in the PDF, so you'll be able to go ahead and watch the video on parallel teaching and let me know if you have any questions at all about what that might look like. But that is what parallel teaching would be. That is one co-teaching model. Another one is station teaching. This one, what would happen is one of the teachers would be at one station teaching maybe a math concept, and the second teacher might be teaching something else, a different math concept, or maybe it's a reading concept or something like that. And then you would have a third station where students could work independently. So in this case, we're actually like strategically doubling our teaching time with our students within a short amount of time. So again, a lot of power comes here. In the station teaching though, you are still collaborating with the other teacher because you want to be able to make connections between those stations. But you are able to, like I said, strategically plan to be able to get the two different concepts to the students at the same time as they go through and rotate through stations. Okay, alternative or differentiated teaching. This one is almost kind of like assisting in a way, but in this one, what you would notice is that one teacher, so you know, the co-teachers would be talking, they'd be discussing, they'd be talking about what they're going to teach, and then they think about from the assessments, from what they've observed, these are the students that may need a little extra support. And in that case, then the one co-teacher would be in the front of the classroom teaching the whole class, and the other teacher would be able to pull a small group to the back of the room. This is something that you might also have seen and maybe not even realized it was co-teaching. A lot of times reading teachers will walk in and they'll do something like that and pull a small guided reading group. Sometimes you will also see the special ed teachers go in and do the same type of thing. It is co-teaching, but the big piece to make it a real co-teaching is to collaborate, discuss, and realize where you're going with what it is that you're teaching with each other, the two teachers. So team teaching, like I said, co-teaching is sometimes intermixed with team teaching, at least the terminology is. In team teaching, this is one of the most powerful types of co-teaching models. And what this is that both teachers are working together. They're in the front of the classroom, they're teaching together, they're bouncing thoughts off of each other. The cool part of this one is the fact that, you know, both of you, even though you've collaborated, both of you have found a common ground, you're both going to look at a concept or a topic differently. And in this type of teaching, you can actually show the students the different ways that you can actually look at the same concept from the different perspectives of the two teachers. Another thing with team teaching that can be amazing, when I was teaching in the K through 12 area, I did a lot of fishbowl. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but what it would be is a teacher would come in and her and I would actually fishbowl for the students. So it's almost like they're looking at us like we're fish in a fishbowl. And we would be showing them an expectation. So we would share what a discussion might look like. We would share what our thought process might look like, a think aloud. And then we would put that new learning onto our students. And so it was just a really cool way to model expectation. But it's also just an amazing way to be able to show students, like I said, different perspectives, even though it's the same concept. So team teaching has an amazing amount of benefits to it. It is one of the harder ones though, because like I said, those challenges that we talked about earlier, if you're going to team teach, you have to be able to go through each one of those and know, okay, we're going to have the common planning time. We're going to be able to share the responsibilities in the classroom. And again, the most important thing is that we have found a common ground in our philosophy of classroom management, as well as our philosophy of teaching and instruction. So the implementation of this would go back again to understanding the benefits and then also the challenges. So a co-teaching pair does not necessarily use the same teaching model every day. So let's say that you do a parallel teaching one day, okay? And the next day, you probably, maybe you don't want to do parallel teaching and you do a station teaching to kind of reiterate the concepts that you were teaching in the parallel teaching. One day you might just decide, you know what, we're going to do an observe. Let's just sit back and observe. So one teacher's teaching and then you observe the next day. So you want to intermingle those. My greatest suggestion from somebody who is in schools all the time and working with teachers constantly is to think of your purpose. What is the purpose of what you're teaching? And how can the two of you meet that purpose? And then you can decide what the model would be for your co-teaching opportunity. Again, you would need to do that collaboratively and together at a common time. You do need to understand the unique needs of the classroom. So getting to know our students, building those relationships, knowing where they are as learners, checking assessments, You know, a big thing is we are always looking at assessments, right? We're looking for data, we're looking for numbers, because that's what's kind of molded in our head. But what we need to start to realize is it's not about those numbers. Those numbers tell us nothing. What tells us something is the analysis of those numbers. What do those numbers actually mean? What do they represent? And that is how we know what our students need. And then we start to decide what we are going to do together to help them get there. This is kind of a big thing whenever you take on any new, and I'm looking at allow for an adjustment period. When you take on any kind of new teaching style, any new idea, okay, so if you take on co-teaching and you do it for a week and it's failing and you're miserable and it's not working, don't give up. I think that's a really important thing to remember, because as you are adjusting into this, as you're trying to get your place, figure out where are we in this? How are we going to do this? You have to give yourself time. So allow yourself that adjustment period before giving up on the co-teaching altogether. Remember, there's different ways to do it. That's going to help you. Start with this, smaller little things like the observations, or even the teaching and the assisting. You can start with that and then start to build towards a full-blown team teaching. I just wanted to check real quick here, see if there is something in the chat. Okay. So discussion of varying levels of preparation for each model is needed. So again, with each of these models, there's more needed in your team teaching conversation. There's a ton needed for the parallel teaching. So if you're teaching the exact same lesson in the same kind of way, depending on the group of students, that collaboration, that preparation, being sure you're ready to go, it's so needed. And just be sure that you're discussing that ahead of time. And then afterwards, doing almost like a post type of conference with one another to see how it went, and then make changes as needed for the next day. Again, understanding the differences in each other's knowledge and the teaching styles and the individual needs of the students is the only way to make co-teaching work, is to understand each other, understand you're not alone in this process, and that you're there to help each other as well as help the students. And then when teachers are prepared to use various models and are comfortable sharing their classroom as equals, the experience for students can be seamless and can be effective. So I'm going to share with you just a little bit of something here, since I have a little extra time because the video is not working. But when you co-teach, if you really think about what that truly means, and the idea that you have more than one mind working together to be able to create lessons that are truly going to meet each student in that classroom, build relationships, because there's two of you. So if one of you don't connect, the other one can. But it's really important to realize that by doing that, we are pushing our students. We are becoming champions for them. We're letting them know they're worth it. We are giving them the time that they need to be successful through this type of model. We can do that also on our own, but how amazing could it be if we actually had two of us doing that? But I'm also going to tell you this. So I did read some research about the co-teaching, so I'm giving you all these great things, and it just seems so obvious. However, there's also research out there to say that co-teaching does not work. And I'm not going to leave that out because it's kind of important to mention. As you look into the limitations of the studies that show that co-teaching does not work, it is typically because of the things I told you that are challenges. If your school district is not supporting it, if administration is not understanding it, if you do not have co-planning time, if you cannot find a common ground with the teacher that you are co-teaching with, then it will not succeed. And you will notice that your students are not starting to close the gap, but instead maybe even spreading further apart. So the big idea are these things I just shared with you, and the fact that you want to really, truly, if you're going to take on something like co-teaching, understand the models, understand what you need to do as you take this on, allow for an adjustment period, allow your time to be able to figure out how much control can I give over, and how can we find a common ground in our beliefs, and then see how it goes. So with that, I am actually going to wrap us up. And I want to bring us back to the TED Talk video and the fact that we should go out there, be champions, try different things out, don't be scared of them, and know, like, this is just the beginning of what co-teaching models look like. but we can always go deeper into that. Certainly, my email is on the PowerPoint. So if you have questions or if you are interested in how do we really get this implemented and started in our school district, you feel free to contact me at any time. I'm definitely available to you. With that, I will bring it to questions and answers.